Because how embarrassing would that be? It's like, is he going to know, or he or she going to know that I'm taking their benefit and I'm yeah, exactly.
Yes. And I think that's such a common misconception of the whole process. I feel like so often people think that their ex-spouse has to find out that you're claiming on their benefit. And there's no necessary reason for that at all.
Welcome to a Wiser Retirement Podcast. Are you curious about your Social Security benefits if you're divorced? I'm Shauna Theriault, and today I'm joined by financial advisor Michaela Dowdy. Each week, we bring you practical advice on retirement, investing, and planning for your financial future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Let's get started. So we are debuting from our new podcast room, which is really, really exciting.
It is exciting. I'm shocked that we're getting to be the two that are allowed to have this special moment.
And we've never done a podcast together,
no,
right?
We haven't.
So it's the two girls in the new podcast room, and it's a soundproof room. So they closed the door, and I was like, wait, are they locking us in here? Because
we're not allowed to leave.
I'm a little claustrophobic, and I'm like, wait, are we locked? It's like those escape rooms you can't get out of, but even though you can, I'm like, you better make sure you don't actually lock the door, because then it would not be good.
No, trapped in, they're going to send us codes, and we're just going to have to figure it all out.
Right. It's like being stuck in an elevator, right?
No, exactly. All of the elevators at my apartment were down this morning because they're taking all the power out at my apartment to do some repairs.
Oh.
So I had 19 flights of stairs to go down this morning.
Well, you're not even sweaty or anything.
Right?
You got your workout in for the day.
I did.
Now you don't have to go to bar.
Exactly. No more bar workout classes
19 flights?
19 flights of stairs.
Was your dog home this morning?
Yes. So thankfully, though, they hadn't turned off the power before I took her out. So I took her out at like 6 o'clock this morning. So she was okay.
Oh, gosh. But that would be a lot of stairs up and down.
It would have been. No. But thank goodness everything was okay. But just the going down all those flights was not ideal this morning. But down's better than up.
It is. It is. Absolutely.
I'll really get a workout.
You had to carry all your bags too. All your bags and your computer. Oh, gosh. Well, workout queen.
There you go.
Good thing you're healthy and in shape, right?
I know, right? Right.
Well, today we're going to be talking about Social Security and divorce. And so that's one of the things when someone's getting divorced that you don't think about. And it's not really something you could negotiate in the divorce because it's really has a lot of different rules surrounding it. And I don't know that we'll cover every single situation today because it's just, so
many out there.
We were talking about that. It's like, well, what if this and what if this? And, there's so many different situations, but it's just one of those things you don't think about when you're getting divorced because, I mean, really when you're married, when you start taking Social Security, you can either take yours or half of your spouse's, depending on whichever's higher. And so it's like, well, what happens if I'm divorced? It's like you didn't plan for that potentially. And again, it's nothing you can negotiate in the divorce decree or anything because it's really a matter of different factors, which we'll go through. But it's just something to be aware of. So if you're divorced, what the situation is. And so what are the rules surrounding divorce and Social Security, just the general ages and all of that?
Yes. So essentially, if you're married longer than 10 years, that's where you have the ability to then start claiming potentially on your ex-spouse's benefit. So that is the big number, is that 10-year number to be married for that long, then you'll have access to their benefit.
So maybe make it last another year if you're going 9, right? No. Don't do Social Security planning with a divorce. Yes. But it might be,
it could be a little bit, depending on the situation.
For husband
definitely.
Or wife,
No, it could be beneficial either way, of course.
Of course. Yeah. So it's 10 years, but then obviously Social Security rules, you have to be at least 62 to claim Social Security.
Exactly.
Still in either way, unless you're disabled, that's a little bit different, but it's generally 62. Yes. And so then would you get the same rules of theirs or yours, or how does that work?
Yes. So essentially you're entitled to 50% of their benefit.
Okay.
But you're having to wait as long as you're age 62 or older is then when you can start claiming on their benefit. So you do have to be at your retirement age or Social Security claiming age, at least for yourself. Of course, 62 is not full retirement age. So full retirement age is different, and that could vary 66, 67, just depending on your own age. But that's something that you do want to keep in mind because you still won't have their full benefit necessarily either at that point. Right. So just making sure you're claiming at that point, but then also you have to currently be unmarried is a big proponent of that, which is huge.
Yeah.
So that's just a big consideration there as well. Is so not only do you have to have been married for 10 years, but then you also have to be age 62 or older, of course, to be looking at this, but then also currently unmarried.
Not remarried, yeah.
So you haven't remarried either. And so that's a big proponent that we see as being, I don't want to call it an issue, because also if you found that special someone
right.
to, get remarried to, and that's so special. So it's not necessarily
it doesn't really matter about the money.
And it
right?
doesn't matter
right.
at that point. But it is something just to consider and to know that if there is a difference there, then you wouldn't likely have the access to that benefit any longer.
Well, and really when we're doing planning for individuals, whether they're married, not married, divorced, it's really, what makes sense from taking Social Security in general. So, it's still going to be a factor of how long are you going to live. So your benefit will still grow. Your personal benefit will still grow beyond age 62 to full retirement age. Most full retirement age is 67.
Yes.
And then you max out at 70, right? And so after that, you just take it. And so it's really based on how long are you going to live. So the calculation there is not necessarily different. It's just what's better. Is your benefit better, or maybe half of your ex-spouse's benefit?
Exactly.
And so it's really a matter of, usually the break even is around age 78, where we see it makes sense to wait till age 70 to take your benefit later.
Yes.
And so that's not really going to change when we're looking in terms of planning. And so, that makes sense to wait. But if there's any health issues or anything like that, then, maybe we look at taking it a little bit earlier than that, or other factors, assets, income, other factors if it's really slim. And so just trying to maximize what you're getting there. The good news is that, your ex-spouse doesn't have to know or even approve it.
Yes.
Because how embarrassing would that be? It's is he going to know, he or she going to know that I'm taking their benefit and I'm yeah, exactly.
Yes. And I think that's such a common misconception of the whole process. I feel like so often people think that their ex-spouse has to find out that you're claiming on their benefit. And there's no necessary reason for that at all.
Yeah.
Even if it's something like, it's interesting kind of how the system works. And I'm going to talk a little bit in stereotypes of, a husband can have multiple wives. And if he's married to those multiple wives for 10 years each, all of them can claim on his benefit.
And it doesn't reduce the others.
And it doesn't reduce anybody's. It doesn't reduce his. It's so fascinating.
Do we think that that's adding to the issue of the Social Security? I guess not if it's claiming theirs or theirs. So maybe it's a little bit of a difference. It's not the full amount, right?
Maybe not. But it is fascinating. When I found out that fact a few years ago, I was like, wow, you can just have as many, and they all have claiming
But there's
status.
only so many 10-year periods in your life where you can work and not,
Yes.
So there can't be that many.
Exactly.
Because you can have multiple at one time.
True, very true.
At least to my knowledge.
For Social Security purposes,
Probably
I don't think
so. Exactly. So it's still only so many 10-year periods in your lifetime where you could have to do that. So.
Are you curious why annuities keep coming up as a potential investment option? People are often told that annuities can effectively mitigate investment risks and help secure their financial future. However, annuities often benefit the salesperson and might not be the best choice for you as a consumer. To learn more about the various types of annuities, the negatives of owning them, and better investment alternatives, we have a free ebook on our website just for you. To download our ebook, Buyer Beware, Why Do They Keep Trying to Sell You That Annuity? Simply click the link in the episode notes or visit wiserinvestor.com/guides. Now let's get back to the episode.
also, so looking at, there's differences if your ex-spouse is alive or deceased. So you could be a widow, or it could be that your ex-spouse passed away after you divorced too. So it may not be that you were a widow and then got remarried, or you know, it's really, there's a difference where it's your ex-spouse as in divorce and then they pass away.
Yes.
Because then the rules change a little bit if they're passed away.
Yes.
So it's not half their benefit.
It's then the full benefit.
Right.
So you're getting to claim that full spousal benefit at that point for a deceased spouse. So
Right.
you're going to get that full 100% benefit.
The widow benefit.
The widow benefit.
Right. Exactly.
Instead of having half benefit that would be if you're just claiming on an ex-spousal benefit.
And so, you know, I have seen situations before where, you know, maybe your ex-husband or wife passed away. And so you're claiming that spouse, or not spousal, I guess it would be the widow benefit at that point, and then letting your own build and then claiming your own at age 70.
Which is a great strategy to work with. Not that you would wish at that point for anything to have happened to
your
a spouse or anything like that.
Most of us don't wish the exes have something happen.
No, exactly.
Right.
So that's something where that does tend to, though, be a silver lining in that, is that you do get to allow your benefit to grow while you're at least getting to have some of that supplemental come in from the widower benefit.
So you can switch to the spousal after the ex. So let's say let's say you're remarried. So there's a rule surrounding that where if you are over age 62, I believe it is. So if you get remarried before that age, then you don't get either benefit. You don't get the ex-spousal benefit, or if they pass away, the decedent, if you get remarried. Now, if that second marriage ends in divorce or death or annulment, then you could potentially reclaim on your ex-spouse again, either the widow or the spousal.
Yes.
So it's kind of confusing there. If you're over that age, then and you get remarried, then you can still claim on your ex-spouse if it's higher, if they are passed away. So there's that weird nuance where if you get remarried after that certain age, if you get remarried, then you can potentially claim on your ex-spouse if they're passed away. But if they're still alive, you can't.
Exactly.
So it's
which is where the situations get so tricky.
It is.
And that's where you really just have to dive into all of these rules and what all is happening. Because even we were having to do research on exactly what happens in all of these different situations. Right.
Because we haven't seen all those. I don't know that I have seen all those.
I don't think so. I don't know if I've seen that one either. Yeah.
No, where you're like remarried. I have seen one situation where remarried after that certain age, still claiming on ex-spouse that has passed away as a widow benefit and letting theirs build even though they're still remarried.
Yes.
So you didn't preclude yourself from that because you were over that threshold. And, you know, I mean, I think it makes sense. They're just making sure that if you need to draw from someone that had passed and you get remarried, that you're not, you know, in the case of a widow. Exactly. You know, that you're not penalized in that.
No, because I mean, that's just a heartbreaking thing to go through, whether it's an ex-spouse or, you know, it's a situation that you got divorced after the fact. You could get remarried, you know, from your deceased spouse. And so that's just something that it can be really difficult to balance that. And
I mean, even if they're an ex, it could be like the parent of your children.
Exactly.
You know, where they lost their parents. So, and the whole situation is just really, really sad for sure.
Definitely.
So there's so many nuances around that.
And while we're talking about just the widower benefit and allowing your own benefit to grow, it is just important to know that if you were to claim just the spousal benefit, so not widower benefit, so your spouse is not, or your ex-spouse is not deceased, your benefit's not going to continue to grow if you claim on the ex-spouse benefit.
Okay. Okay. So yours is not going to continue to grow.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, interesting. But it does if you're a widow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So it's like not the benefit, but it's like one of the silver linings to that widower. So yes, if you're claiming on your ex-spouse's record, you're not going to get those delayed retirement credits going to your own benefit.
Got it. But it's only 50% of theirs.
Correct.
So really, if you made, you know, any kind of decent money, then it's still probably better to take yours eventually and let yours build.
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise half of his, it just depends on what it is.
Yeah.
But you can always set up an appointment with the Social Security office and talk about that. Even if it is your ex-spouse, they're going to see that you were tied together at some point and talk about that. So you can ask all those questions and try to figure that out. And I have seen online, there's actually calculators on the Social Security website. So if you go to ssa.gov, make sure it's .gov. You can log into your account, but also there's other calculators that you can just play with and say what ifs. So that's very, very helpful. So you can look at different, projections in terms of, widow versus ex-spouse, et cetera. Yeah. So there's different calculators you can look at there.
Definitely.
The bottom line is that you want to look at this with your overall financial plan and really look at all of your options to see what is best. And I don't know that I would do Social Security planning necessary around your divorce or marriage and new marriage, but maybe, I mean, you may want to take that into consideration if it's going to be a huge difference.
Definitely.
The timing does matter. Sometimes you don't want to make those kind of decisions based on the financial, but it does absolutely matter. But just knowing too that you don't have to know all the rules of it, and they all could change. That's the thing. All of these change all the time. But just, if you are going through a divorce, just know that when you're running plans or working with an advisor, that there are different options there, just depending on your overall situation. Yeah. So, don't want you to think that, and again, you can't really plan for that in the divorce decree. But really the timing is really important, the strategy of it. And just looking on what's the best for you. And sometimes we have to make decisions based on what we know today, even though things could change. And, if it works with your overall plan and it still looks good for the long run, then, taking that into consideration and just knowing what the numbers are so important.
Exactly. And that's just, Social Security is just a vital part, I feel like, to anyone's plan, no matter what, even if you have a larger net worth and overall just a state in general, to pull from your portfolio, anything like that. Still, Social Security tends to be a very vital point of that picture and the success of your plan. So you definitely want to make sure you're making the right decisions for you and your family and whoever, whether you get married again or not. I'm just making sure that you have the right decisions there being made.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. I think you're going to go through a couple other podcasts we have potentially and some other educational videos.
Yes. So essentially what we have is multiple different podcast episodes. So related to this one, though, is episode 160 of How Finances Affect Divorce. There's also episode 222, which is When Should I Claim Social Security If I Don't Need It? And then related financial education videos is Unretirement, How Returning to Work Affects Your Social Security Benefits. Another one is How Much is Social Security Reduced If I Have a Pension? And then the last one is Common Mistakes to Avoid with Social Security Spousal Benefits. So just something to look at there. We've also linked the Social Security calculator as well that Shauna was referencing. So that'll be linked in the show notes as well. But thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about Wiser Wealth Management or want to schedule a consultation to meet one of our fiduciary financial advisors, head to wiserinvestor.com or click the link in the episode notes. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you don't miss any new episodes. We'd also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out. This podcast is strictly for informational purposes only and is not to be considered as investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any financial products, securities, digital assets, or any other investment vehicles, or a basis to make any financial decisions. Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investor advisor with the SEC. The host and/or guests may personally own securities, digital assets, or other investment vehicles mentioned on this podcast. Neither the host nor guests of the show are compensated for their participation, and no referral fees are paid to or received by any host or guest for clients, listeners, or similar interests. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, insurance professional, and/or legal professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.